Summer's officially here, and the bikini sale at shackshop.us is happening right now. Get hot styles, bold prints, and perfect fits, all on sale for a limited time. Whether you're beach-bound or poolside, we've got the bikini that makes you feel confident, cute, and totally summer-ready. So don't wait. Head to shackshop.us and shop the sale before it ends. That's shackshop.us, your new favorite bikini spot.
A fatal shooting during a federal immigration enforcement operation in Minneapolis has reignited national debates over border security, federal authority, political activism, and media credibility. The death of Alex Jeffrey Pretti, a 37-year-old U.S. citizen and ICU nurse, has become the center of a sharply polarized narrative battle, one in which federal officials, video evidence, activist groups, and media outlets offer conflicting interpretations of the same chaotic moments. What is not disputed is that federal law enforcement officers fired the shots that killed Pretti during an operation targeting an illegal immigrant with a violent criminal history. What is disputed is why the shooting occurred, what Pretti was doing at the time, and whether the federal response was justified. This analysis breaks down what is known, what remains contested, how different media ecosystems framed the event, and why this incident fits into a broader national pattern involving immigration enforcement and political resistance. The incident. What happened in Minneapolis? Timeline of events. In the early hours of Saturday morning, federal immigration enforcement officers, identified by the Department of Homeland Security as U.S. Border Patrol agents, were conducting a targeted operation in Minneapolis. According to DHS, the operation was aimed at Jose Huerta Chuma, an illegal immigrant reportedly wanted for violent assault, with prior charges including domestic assault, disorderly conduct, and driving without a valid license. During the operation, a confrontation unfolded involving officers and multiple civilians. Video footage circulating online shows a physical struggle erupting. Amid the chaos, one federal agent draws his firearm and fires multiple rounds. Alex Jeffrey Pretti is struck and later pronounced dead. Who was Alex Jeffrey Pretti? Alex Pretti was a Minneapolis resident, U.S. citizen, and intensive care nurse employed by the Department of Veterans Affairs. He was 37 years old. He was also identified by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE, as one of its members, a fact later emphasized by labor organizations and progressive activists as evidence of his civic standing. What has fueled controversy is not Pretti's profession or citizenship status, but his actions during the operation and whether he posed a lethal threat. DHS account, armed threat during active enforcement. Official statement. The Department of Homeland Security released a preliminary statement shortly after the shooting, describing a rapidly evolving and dangerous scenario. According to DHS, officers were conducting a lawful targeted immigration enforcement operation. An individual, later identified as Pretti, approached agents while armed with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Officers attempted to disarm the individual violently resisted. An agent fired in self-defense, fearing for his life and the safety of others. DHS further stated that Pretti was allegedly found with a 9mm handgun, 2 magazines, no identification. The department characterized the situation as one with mass casualty potential, stating it appeared the individual intended to inflict maximum harm on law enforcement. DHS also released a photograph of a firearm it claims was recovered at the scene. The video evidence, fuel for dispute. Video clips circulating online shortly after the shooting have become central to public debate. Critics argue the footage appears to show Pretti not actively pointing a gun, agents firing from behind, confusion over whether officers were aware he was armed at that moment. Supporters of law enforcement counter that short video clips do not capture the full encounter. Officers are trained to assess threats in seconds, not after the fact. The presence of a firearm during a physical struggle dramatically escalates risk. Importantly, video alone does not establish intent, nor does it conclusively show what officers perceived in real time. A pattern of escalation in Minneapolis. This incident did not occur in isolation. Earlier this month, Renee Good, a Minneapolis woman, was shot and killed during a separate immigration enforcement operation after attempting to interfere with federal officers. That shooting sparked protests, demonstrations, and increased political activism against immigration enforcement in the Twin Cities. Taken together, these events suggest a growing pattern of civilian interference with federal operations, often framed by activists as protest or resistance, but viewed by law enforcement as obstruction or threat escalation. Right-leaning coverage. Right-of-center outlets largely reported DHS statements as authoritative, emphasizing the danger of armed interference in law enforcement operations, the criminal history of the enforcement target, the broader issue of hostility towards ICE and Border Patrol, officer safety amid rising anti-law enforcement sentiment. Coverage focused on rule of law, border enforcement, and the dangers of politicizing on-the-ground operations. Center coverage,
centrist outlets acknowledged DHS claims, Pretti's background and death, the existence of video footage, but often stop short of endorsing either narrative, framing the situation as under investigation. Left-leaning coverage. Left-leaning outlets strongly challenge DHS's account, often framed it as premature, politically motivated, inconsistent with available video. Some reports describe Pretti as holding a phone, not a gun, and raised concerns about federal overreach and militarized immigration enforcement. Notably, language such as portrayed as a domestic terrorist appeared in coverage, despite DHS not formally charging or labeling Pretti as such. Media bias and narrative incentives. This case illustrates how media ecosystems filter facts through ideological lenses. Right-leaning outlets prioritize institutional authority and enforcement legitimacy. Left-leaning outlets prioritize state skepticism and civilian harm. Social media accelerates emotional framing before investigations conclude. The result is parallel realities, where audiences receive fundamentally different interpretations of the same event. Legal framework, what the law says. Use of force. Federal officers are legally permitted to use lethal force when they reasonably believe there is an immediate threat of death or serious bodily harm. The threat assessment is based on what the officer perceived at the time, not later evidence. Courts routinely defer to split-second judgment in violent encounters, especially when firearms are present. Interference with federal operations. Federal law prohibits civilians from obstructing, resisting, assaulting, interfering with federal officers performing official duties. Even well-intentioned interference can legally escalate risk.
Confirmed facts. Alex Jeffrey Pretti was killed by federal law enforcement. He was a U.S. citizen and ICU nurse. The operation targeted an illegal immigrant with a criminal record. Video footage exists of the encounter. DHS claims Pretti was armed. Disputed or under investigation. Whether Pretti actively brandished a firearm. Whether officers clearly identified him as armed at the moment shots were fired. Whether lethal force was the only reasonable option. Whether DHS's characterization aligns with full evidence. No final investigative findings have yet been released. Broader implications. This case sits at the intersection of immigration enforcement, public resistance, media trust, law enforcement accountability. As immigration operations increasingly occur in politically hostile environments, the risk of fatal misunderstandings rises for civilians and officers alike. Conclusion. The Minneapolis shooting underscores a grim reality. When politics, activism, and enforcement collide in real-world operations, outcomes can turn deadly. Before investigations conclude, responsible reporting demands restraint, attribution, and context, not narrative certainty driven by ideology. The truth will ultimately depend not on viral clips or partisan framing, but on forensic evidence, official findings, and legal review.